So when you're after practicing what we preach, now we need to search and see if our souls are black or not, because that was the name of Testament's new album. The fourth album, Souls of Black, came out in 1990. Now, at this point in time, as we mentioned with Practice What You Preach, it really seemed as though that was the weakest of the three albums, and then Souls of Black came out in 90 and kind of incorporated some new elements as well, as Practice As You Preach had done previously. With Souls of Black, this is an album where it didn't even span 40 minutes in length for the 10 tracks, so you have a track length average of less than 4 minutes, so this is definitely quick. Now, for a thrash album, that's not something that necessarily means that it's short by any means, considering there's a lot being packed into one. However, this is certainly something where the tracks seem to be a little bit more neatly compacted, as opposed to being allowed to breathe a little bit. And this actually did cause this album to suffer a little bit, in my opinion, and that's just me, just coverkillernation, personally, because as Practice What You Preach was the worst out of the first three, I think Souls of Black is probably one of the weakest, if not the weakest, out of the first four. It's not necessarily that this is a negative or a bad album, and it isn't necessarily that it's a real far difference compared to the Legacy and the New Order. It's just something that doesn't exactly have the same element to it. This is something where the construction process has certainly become a little bit more simplistic, and one where the drum definitely interferes a little bit with the overall experience. There's a little bit of a jangle to it. It's something that doesn't exactly register the same way, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but it is a mild nuisance. This is also something where Alex Skolnick, though, really saves this album. His soloing and his guitar work on this disc is absolutely phenomenal. Now, I understand it seems like we've been saying that for each and every one of these Testament discs. However, on Souls of Black, this is certainly one where it really seems to illuminate itself even further. Now, this is a disc that definitely doesn't have any, slouch-worthy material. However, whenever you look at it at face value, this is certainly one that doesn't seem to have as much in the way of memorable material. The song that really stands out to me on this album because of its difference as opposed to everything else is The Legacy. The Legacy, similar to the ballad on Practice What You Preach, kind of bore more of a slower, down-tempo sound to it, not to mention it gave the band a little bit of an opportunity to explore with some slower material. And whenever I heard this, knowing where we're heading after this album, it kind of made sense that the band went into the direction that they did with their fifth studio release, which we'll cover in the next video. Because some of the seeds were already being sown with Souls of Black. Some of that was already being registered and already placed into the mental memory banks, because there is some of those ideas already laced on this album. Some of the more commercially sounding, tempo riffs, either that or what you would call the rhythm riffs, rather, definitely have that idea and that glow to them, especially once you hear the fifth album. It's something that definitely happens a little bit more. The experimentation, however, with The Legacy definitely is a true positive, but then whenever you consider some of the other songs on the album, such as the title track Souls of Black, or Malpractice, or even Absence of Light, you do see that there's some real good material on here, and the soloing and the individual effort of Alex Skolnick should not be discounted whatsoever. It's certainly one of the highlights of this disc. It almost seems as though that on this album it was almost like a transition album. Fans of the band may not have known what was coming with the fifth release that this band was going to put out. However, now that we have a little bit of 2020 hindsight vision, we definitely can see kind of why we should have seen it coming. And it's time for us to talk about that album. I understand that this was kind of short, but that's principally because this is an album that is kind of short, and one that really doesn't have that much going for it, at least in my opinion, with the lone exception of the fact that it's a hell of a guitar album. I can't say Alex's name enough whenever it comes to this release, because it truly saves it. 7 Days in May, it's a pretty decent outro. It definitely still has, the album definitely has the reminiscence of the thrash overtones that we've heard with their first 4 discs, Souls of Black included. However, this is one that seems a little bit more of a far cry compared to the previous 3. Just as Practice What You Preach seemed like a far cry compared to the previous 2. Wow, numbers. But now it's time for us to go on. It's time for us to move forward and perform ourselves a bit of a heavy metal ritual. Well, for me at least. Stay tuned.